So, how are you, Eric? Nice to see you. Thank you for coming on the show.
Nice to be seen. I'm quite well. It's a sunny day in upstate New York.
Oh, is that where you are? Okay. I never know where
Hmm.
people are calling in from. So, well,
Yep.
great. Glad to hear it. Let's see. You got a book out called Cuppy and Stew. And I was really kind of interested in when I saw the overview of this. The real life tragedy of the bombing of United Flight 629 back in 1955. Okay, I didn't even know there was air terrorism in 1955.
Hi. Well, it's very interesting because it was the first case of air terrorism uh, in the U.S. Really. A sociopath named Jack Gilbert Graham put a bomb on the plane to kill his mother.
Oh,
Took down the entire flight on a flight out of Denver on its way to the West Coast. Unfortunately for my wife, who was 12 at the time, her parents were on that flight.
oh, I see. So this has got some personal connection for you, yeah?
The challenge in writing the book, um, there were multiple challenges, but the first part, because it's essentially a historical novel, it's set between 1937 and 1955, when the plane blew up on November 1st. The second part of the book, and it's kind of like a linchpin, the bombing is, reads much like a memoir, except it's my wife's memoir from 1955 when she was sent back to live in Vancouver, BC, where she'd never lived with her older sister, until she escapes the Dickensian events of her childhood there. The question was how to tell the story. And the answer ultimately became uh, Susan Morgan, the character, tells her parents' story and then her own. But of course, it's me, the novelist, imagining a character named Susan Morgan, imagining her parents' story. So there's several layers of the narration.
Okay, so back then there was no airport security to speak of, correct?
That's right. And not only that, there was no law against bombing a commercial airliner.
You're
When
kidding.
no, when no, when and in fact, uh, Jack Gilbert Graham was caught fairly quickly. He had tried to take out flight insurance as people could in those machines in the airports
Right.
back then. And luckily for my wife, her parents, who had not really traveled much on their own, he was a businessman, had taken out maximum flight insurance on each of them. But Graham didn't get his mother to sign the application. He took her to the airport and was very agitated when this happened. But um, it turned out that he was only convicted of first degree murder, of murdering his mother, because there was no statute against it. It was passed in between the time of the bombing and his execution. And they didn't really mess around back then. Um, the plane took off late for reasons that are disclosed in the book. Um, and instead of the bomb going off when flight 629 was over the Rocky Mountains, it blew up just outside what was then Stapleton Airfield. And so the parts of the plane were spread out across a sugar beet field. And the FBI, which up to that point, wasn't all that well known, solved the case very, very rapidly. Within days, they had declared it was a bomb because they could find the luggage compartment where the bomb was. Graham had built the bomb out of dynamite and a crude timer, and they could smell the gunpowder. So they had him within under 2 weeks, and he confessed. His attorneys subsequently tried to get the confession suppressed without success, and the prosecutors in Colorado decided that they would just prosecute him for the death of his mother, since they had him confess to that. And really, so the plane went down on November 1st, known as, the Day of the Dead, which haunted my wife for years. And he was convicted, early in 56, and he was executed in early in 57.
Didn't the passengers, or the family of the passengers, the other passengers on the plane, was there no such thing as a class action lawsuit in those days?
No, there was not. I don't think so. And who would they sue? Graham was 23 or 24 when he was executed. He killed his mother because she owned a chicken roaster restaurant, and he wanted some of her money. So there was, because it was such a big deal, it was the first bombing of a commercial airliner in the U.S. There was a big article about it in Life magazine that had pictures of every member of the crew and all the passengers on the plane. In fact, I'm going to hold up the cover of Cuppy and Stew now, and that is the picture of Cuppy and Stew Morgan that ran in Life magazine later in November.
Now, who are the people in the picture?
Those were my wife's parents. Their names were Stuart Morgan and Ann Morgan, but Cuppy was his nickname. Stuart's nickname for his wife, he called her Cupcake, which was a kind of a pet name back in the 50s. I've always thought that had to do with she was considerably younger and quite beautiful. There might have been sexual overtones of Cuppy, as how they had run off together. They had a very dramatic story, which my wife did not know until the reading of the will, really. They had met in 1937 in Vancouver. He was from an upper class family. She was from poor Scottish immigrants. And he was previously married, tried to get a divorce. His family was religious, and his wife and his father forbade that divorce. And so at the end of June 1939, told his family, he was an engineer, that he was going to get a job in South Africa, which he did. He had a job waiting in the gold mines there, left Vancouver on the train, and his girlfriend, his second wife, we assume they were legally married, we don't know, met him. They went across Canada, took a boat to South Africa, and got there in August, and September 1st, World War II broke out. So they were sort of safe in a way. And both my wife and her older sister, Sherry, were born in South Africa. Oh,
that's interesting. So was there such a thing as the FAA back then?
Yes, there was. As I say, that because this had never happened, there wasn't even a statute against it. But the FBI story, the book, which came out the following year, uses the bombing of Flight 629 as its opening incident. And there was later a movie, The FBI Story, in which that plane goes down. in, kind of like the moment just after credits. And it kind of made the reputation of the FBI because there was a huge amount of publicity, and the killer, Jack Gilbert Graham, for a long time was at the head of the list of mass murderers in America, until AK-47s and became widely available later. But for a long time, there's a surprising number of people who are interested, in mass murder and those sorts of things, who know this story, even though it happened, 55 years ago.
How did they manage to track him to it?
He'd had a little bit of an up and down history. Maybe there'd been an arson that he was involved with earlier, never charged. Also trying to get money from something that his mother owned, but I think particularly because he got very agitated when told that the flight insurance he'd taken out on his mother wasn't going to be paid. And then I guess they found the purchase of the 25 sticks of dynamite.
So just good old-fashioned police detective work, basically.
Yes, exactly. And as I say, it really made the reputation of the FBI publicly. The FBI story, the book, came out, in 56 or 57, and J. Edgar Hoover wrote the introduction to the book. So now, for my wife and her older sister, after the parents died, they had just moved to Chicago, and at the reading of the will, they learned that their father had been previously married. This was all news to them. And because his family, which owned, a fancy for society clothing store in Vancouver and a bunch of real estate, they had disowned him when it was discovered he'd run off with another woman. So the only time that Susan ever met her grandfather was at the cemetery, when she was 12 years old. The rest of even though she grew up in Vancouver, went from 8th grade through the end of high school, his family would have nothing to do with these kids. They were instead given to the mother's family, who in many ways wanted the money that had come through the flight insurance, which was being administered by a lawyer in the Midwest. And things went very badly. The grandmother was sort of crazy. She kept the food locked in her closet, claiming the kids were eating her out of house and home. They became wards of the province. And Susan was saved, and the character Susan Morgan, narrates the book retrospectively. She was saved by the fact that she's, the smartest kid for miles around. Her father was a very, very smart man, and she inherited his intelligence, and she managed to escape. And, growing up there, all she wanted to do was to get back to greater Chicagoland, where for the last, couple of months of her parents' lives, they were starting this new lovely life on the north side of Chicago. Her older sister, however, dropped out of school, within a couple of months of their parents' deaths when they were back to Vancouver. She was trying to protect her younger sister, and just never, in many ways, recovered from that terrible loss. So the second half of the book really becomes the story of two sisters trying to survive, the loss of their of their beloved parents. They had a very close family, and they moved around a good deal. He was an engineer and took, worked here and there all around the Pacific Northwest for a couple of years, essentially in exile from Vancouver, where society knew that he'd run off with a younger woman.
Eric, we got to wrap this up. Unfortunately, our time is up. My guest is Eric Goodman. The book is called Cuppy and Stew. Is it available now? Amazon and all the usual places?
Yes. It's available on Amazon and usual places. It's my 6th novel, the first one written entirely in the voice of a woman. And for the period of time we were writing it, I was in touch with my adolescent grieving wife and the wife whom I love today.
So thank you for coming on. Best of luck with the book. I hope it does